How's it going, everybody, and welcome to episode 194 of Master My Garden podcast. Now, this week's episode is an exciting one and going back to, I suppose, a type of episode that I've done quite a bit of in the past, but haven't done recently, and that's talking to a head gardener about Johnstown Castle Estate. And this week we have Ciaran Fitzgerald, who, as I said, is head gardener down there. Johnstown Castle Estate, for any of you that don't know, is it's a beautiful garden and house down in County Wexford in Ireland. Really fabulous place. It's a while since I was there, about maybe 10 years since I was there, but really gorgeous place, nice big lake, new glass house, a glass house that's being renovated. Lots of developments around perennial borders and the renovation of certain areas in the garden. So there's lots going on, and really interesting chat. It's also an RHSI member garden. So if you arrive with your RHSI member card, you can get in there. And yeah, there's lots to talk about. So Ciaran, you're very, very welcome to Master My Garden podcast.
Thanks very much for having me.
We were just talking off air for any of you that are listening. It's September when we're recording this, and it is one of the hottest days we've had in 2023. And I'm currently in an office. The temperature is reading 34 degrees Celsius. Ciaran has just come in from rotivating. So if at any stage you hear one of us passing out, it's just the heat, and we'll be back to you as soon as we wake up. So Johnstown Castle Gardens, as I said, it's been a while since I was down there, but it is a fabulous place, fabulous big castle and lake, huge lake. I'm not sure how big it is, but it's a big, big lake. And you have quite big gardens there as well. And there's obviously lots of other elements to it, not just the gardens. But obviously tell us about Johnstown Castle Estate and the gardens first. And I know you're doing a huge amount of work, and glass house recently renovated. You're working on a huge perennial border at the moment with, I think I saw something today where you're doing 3,000 plants next week into it. So busy time.
Yeah, I don't know where we get the time. Yes. So the estate itself, it's 120 acres. We've 3 lakes actually. There's 2 acre, 6 acre, and 14 acre lake. That one's actually the largest freshwater lake in Wexford. They're all done as famine relief projects. So the estate itself was redesigned in the mid 1840s by Daniel Robertson, who did power sport and a few other places around East Ireland mainly. But it's done in that kind of capability brown side where it's like a landscape art and a gardens design. So they completely reshaped the valley which was here. So they banked up one end, which created the castle lake originally, and then they did the lower lake. And all the kind of the follies, the statue, the terrace walk, as we call it, all around the grounds, they were all done as family relief projects as well. So it's, the scope of what was done and when it was done was quite spectacular.
Yeah, amazing how you could do that sort of, because that's excavation, that's cutting a pathway through the landscape basically. And
like we lost an awful lot of records when the castle was handed over to the state, but we had like the handful that we had, like one for the lower lake. There's a report of like 400 men with shovels and donkeys digging that one out. So that was like 14 acres. It was tough going.
Yeah, like if you said someone was doing that today, like you're talking about obviously huge excavators, machines, dump trucks. To think of it in that time, it's a phenomenal effort.
And like even some of the stuff that they did, where the wall garden is now is nearly a kilometre away from where the original wall garden was.
Right.
So if anyone was here in the kind of around maybe 5-6 years ago, they would have known our old entrance into the ground. So the original wall garden was there, and then they dismantled it in 1845. Built the first half of our current one around 1847, and then they built the second half of our current one in 1852. So it's now a 4-acre wall garden split into 2 2-acre sections.
Wow.
So most of our work at the moment is in the first 2 acres. That's kind of the ornamental, and then the second half is, we keep referring to it, that's the 10-year project.
Okay.
The half is the 4-year project. So it's
right.
Back half was an awful lot of work. I've been here 4 years now, and this is the 4th year now that if you stand at the gate in the centre of the wall garden, you can see all of the walls in the second half. They were that overgrown before, so it's still a lot of more work to do there, but we get there eventually.
Okay, we'll talk about the wall gardens in a minute. So just take us a slight step back first. So you're now the head gardener there. Where did you get into gardening? You're there 4 years, you said. Where did you get into gardening? What's your kind of story leading to this?
Funny, so like my ma is an avid gardener. She
Okay.
has a stunning garden at home, loads of real tropical stuff. So it's kind of that. Well, she won't say that's what got me into it because I used to hate weeding the beds. But I suppose what really got me into it was my first summer job was in Lismore Castle.
Oh, brilliant! Yes, class.
Yeah, sure. So I was there for about 6 summers, and that's when I realized, wow,
Yeah.
one, I can get paid to do this, but also second, like I love working in that sort of setting, kind of big estates. I went on then and did horticulture and WIT, and did landscape design then up in Blackrock College afterwards. So I had like the ambition was to get into landscape design more, so I loved that side of stuff. Designing
Okay.
it for about a year in Dublin, but it wasn't what I wanted. I kind of discovered, and also was a lot more stressful than I thought it was going to be. Kind of just dealing with county councils and everything. I didn't really settle into it the way I thought I would. So I reverted back to kind of what I always loved really, and just kind of fell back into kind of large estate gardens and managing them. So I've been in a few places since. I've been in Ballinkeel House, which is a private house up in kind of middle Wexford. I've been in Kilmokee before here, which is a lovely kind of 8-acre garden down in South Wexford near New Ross. And from there, then I moved on to here. But I've been all over. I've done a lot of gardens. Like my work experience in college, I spent 6 months in the Hamptons in Long Island, there, New York, and that was an eye opener. Like, God, some of the houses were like 70.
They were like the estate you're in now.
Oh my God, it was I was on the largest privately owned island in America. It was 300 acres or 3,000 acres, and it's colossal. I think 300 acres is the garden, but the island said it's Gardener's Island. Funnily enough, it's called just off of Long Island. But we were there. We did Julie Andrews' house, and did Roger Waters. I was just like, I've never felt as poor in my life. It was crazy.
I knew somebody that worked in the garden centre trade who in this big garden centre that had a landscape division. I think it was somewhere outside New York as well. But I remember him telling me at one stage they did a private garden for somebody, and there was 30 arctics of plants taken from Italy to be brought to this garden. And he was part of the project, and like he was explaining the scale of everything. You know, the soil that was brought in, the trees that were bought in, the sculptures that were bought in, and it was just mind blowing. Like it's a bit like what those guys, the 200 guys with the shovels and the donkeys took on a few hundred years ago. It was massive scale.
It was nuts. It was that scale. Like, yeah, the company I worked for, I was in the maintenance side rather than the landscape side. Thankfully, really, because God, the slog that the lads were doing in the landscape was crazy. But like we were like some projects we'd be planting in. I remember one of them was out in West Hampton, and there was they wanted to plant 15 blueberry bushes, but they wanted them instant. So these were 7 foot tall, really mature blueberry bushes, but they're about €1,000 each.
Yeah.
Like even just the simple things like that, it was like 15 grand and some blueberry bushes for your holiday home. It was just
it's crazy. It's crazy. Yeah, it actually doesn't make any sense either.
No.
Like, but anyway,
it's a lot more of what I didn't want to do in gardening than what I
it
was a fantastic experience. I'd never take it back. It was just the style. It's just like over in America, it's just different style of gardening.
Yeah. So you've ended up in Wexford. You sound like you're from Wexford, are you?
Oh God, no! It's not. No, Ash. Look, I've been here long enough. I've been here about 8 years now. I'm West Waterford. Down here is more Richie, but
okay.
As they say, my wife's from here, so that's why I'm here.
Okay, yeah, very good. So tell us about the gardens now. So you've mentioned a little bit. So 3 big lakes. I actually thought there was one. So I don't remember too much from 10 years ago, obviously.
No, but the lower lake, the biggest one, that was closed off then. That was only recently. It's only in the last 4 years that has been opened up to the public. So what was the old bridal patch when it was owned by the family, that was all opened up, and we have a huge playground down that end of the lake as well. It's a kilometre and a half of a walk. It's stunning because it just feels completely separate to the castle. When you're down there, you could be just anywhere. There's really mature kind of native forests down there. It's a stunning walk. So it's kind of like we've about 5 kilometres in total of pathways in this estate. 120 acres, so it's a lot. But
Yeah.
yeah, like when it first started, it was a 7-year gap between the last resident gardener and I starting. So it was basically lads contracted to do the grass and clean up branches if they fell. So there was an awful lot to do, kind of
Right.
put it kindly, when I started. So like back then it was just the style at the time, and still I know an awful lot of this like parks and estates are still doing where it was mainly grass cutting. So they used to cut 22 acres of grass here.
Okay.
I reduced that down to just under 9 acres. And that's just around the immediate buildings like the visitor centre, the castle. And then as you kind of come out from them, it gets wilder and wilder as it goes on. So we just over 9 acres of native hay meadow, and then about 6 acres of rough grassland. Then an awful lot of the rest, what was lawn, that was kind of bordering our woodlands. We've now turned them back into woods. So we planted just over 3,000 native trees over the last 4 years. Most of them were grown on site, and if not, we're sourced locally from native, just kind of local nurseries and that. So we've done basically our rule of thumb for outside the wall garden and the visitor centre beds. It's only native, be it everything from trees down to bulbs in the ground.
Okay.
We planted 6,500 native bulbs there, a mixture of stuff. Was it 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago? So a lot of
Okay, so what's in that mix of native bulbs? You obviously have bluebells.
Kind of bluebells, snowdrops, that side of things. Like was it I think it was 2,500 bluebells, 4,000 snowdrops. We had a couple of wood anemones and stuff like that in there as well. Just kind of, it was a lot of trialing and error. We have discovered enough since we started cutting back inner woodland. So we've 50 acres of woodland, 40 acres is engulfed in laurel, which is the bane of my life. And if anyone knows me, they know my deep-seated hatred for laurel.
Yeah.
So we're cutting back about 2 acres of that each winter, and as we're removing that, we're planting in with more native trees. But we've discovered since we started removing laurel, the amount of bluebells and other woodland plants in the seed bank in the ground that have sprung up is absolutely crazy.
Brilliant.
So we're really intrigued to see kind of what else we discover as we get into the wood. We've even found trees that we didn't know were there. We found like nearly like half mature sort of redwoods and huge trees and everything. And it's crazy what's hidden in the woods that we can't wait to open up for the people to see.
Yeah, it's mad. You're saying about laurel. Like laurel is still one of the most popular hedges in Ireland. And this is the common laurel we're talking about. Obviously, Portuguese laurel over the last like Portuguese laurel has got very popular over the last few years. But it's funny. I was reading something, and it was from the UK recently, and what I don't know, was it a city council, but it was along the lines of it is now seen as an invasive species and almost considered in the same breath as Lelandis were. And it's funny because if it's let go the way you're talking about in a wooded situation, it is notorious, and over time it'll just take over everywhere. But I suppose in a garden setting, it's slightly different in that it's never getting like that. It's always kept trim.
Well, it doesn't. If it goes to seed, it can still spread. Like you'll see it a lot in ditches, and you'll notice like as the ditch gets denser and denser with laurel, you get closer to a house that has a laurel hedge. So it's not just like an awful lot of people think it's like the roadies where it's just the layering, but the seeds do spread. Like there was a report on in 1980 here, and it was like 9 acres of the laurel, and that was it was in 3 pockets around the estate. So it would have been for pheasant shooting originally, was what it was brought in for. But now it's spread to 40 acres. In that consignment in areas like crossing paths where it definitely wouldn't, like it would have been seed pollen, like
it's mad. It's a funny one because, as I say, it's seen as invasive in other places. So right, that we're out with the outer levels here now, and we're in the thick of things, and you're restoring that, I suppose, bit by bit, or clearing that and seeing what you're finding. You mentioned then you planted a lot of native trees, which took out some of the grass area. And you also mentioned large, basically wildflower meadows. Were they sown, or did you just let those develop? Or how?
With the hay meadows, we're 2 years into it. It's been like a 4-year sort of a plan with them. So 2 years ago we sowed yellow rattle in, just
Okay.
to weaken the grass. And last year, by pure chance, the Wexford Green Naturalist Club were down with two quite leading ecologists in wildflowers, Paul and Paula.
Okay.
But they were down doing a bioblitz of the estate. They've gridded the entirety of Wexford off into 1 kilometre grids, and we just happened to fall in the spot of 4 kind of adjoining. So they were really intrigued to come back and see what the difference has been, because it's been quite a few years since they recorded here. And we had, in the space of just 1 year of not cutting grass, on a July day, we had 36 different wildflowers, but there's 42 different species in the meadows alone. The rest were different types of grasses. Yeah. So that was just 1 year non-cutting and 1 year of yellow rattle. And since then, yellow rattle is obviously self-seeding and spread a bit more, but the only thing we've added into the meadows is kind of the big perennial stuff, such as verbascums, oxeye daisies, yarrow. Those are the plants, but we're going to hang on until the 4-year cycle is done and the grass has really kind of been weakened before we add in wildflower seed itself.
Yeah, and
everything's sourced from Sandro up in wildflowers.ie. It's all pure native mixes. It's not the pictorial meadow that a lot of people.
Yeah, and you're talking about have you already put the likes of oxeye daisy in there, or you're waiting for the
we put there were 2 kind of areas. So the meadow is spread over 3 different patches. So there's 2 of the areas that we introduced the oxides into in certain sections. We won't spread it throughout because it does tend to self-seed quite a bit.
Yeah.
So we didn't want it overcrowding the entire meadow. So we just have it in 2 patches, and we'll try and kind of contain it as much as we can, because I don't want it to be just oxides. I'd like to introduce a lot of the smaller stuff that could get crowded out.
Brilliant. And did you sow that in as seed, or did you grow plug plants?
We planted them in. So we had a section in the wall garden. We used to call this our nursery seed bed. It was just a strip by the wall, and we basically sowed everything in there, and we used to dig it up almost like sod and then divide it out and plant it in. And again, something different for the volunteers other than weeding, kind of.
Yeah. Brilliant. So coming back in then towards the the wall gardens, you said is it 4 acres in total? The first 2 you're actively working on improving all the time, and the other is still you're cleared back to the walls, but it's sort of the next phase.
Yeah, like with the second half, it'll be an edible woodland eventually. So we've got 70 heritage apple trees planted in there in the last 2 years.
Okay.
Which were a gift to us by one of our volunteers. He grafted them onto rootstocks himself, but he didn't have the room for his own place, so he gave them to us because he knows, he said, at least I can maintain them here myself. He does all the pruning on our espaliers and everything, so I let him off at it because I know he knows what he's at.
Yeah.
And then we have a large area. We inherited a huge area of blueberries, like 90 something of them. They're about 80 years old.
Wow.
So they were left over from when it was an agricultural college. So they're kind of, we need members in to kind of forage and pick berries with them, but we hope to expand. So the idea of the edible woodland is just to show a different way of growing veg rather than the traditional bed. So everything will just be like a highly stylized wood basically, but it'll be like a 7-tier system of fruit nut trees, fruit bushes, perennial veg, mushrooms, climbers, root veg, everything. Basically, it's less resources that we've used to maintain it.
Yeah.
But it's something that can be scaled up or scaled down to any size of the garden, and it's something different as well. I feel like if someone's got with big public spaces and gardens, if you've gone and visited them and if they don't make you think or at least slow down and kind of absorb your surroundings, I think you failed in this design. So I just want to show people a different way of thinking about stuff, really.
Yeah. So you're talking about layering. So you have your tall trees, your fruit bushes, your nut trees, and on the ground where your veg is grown, this is into mulched beds, but they're not going to be formal beds. Is that kind of the idea?
Yeah, it'll be very informal. It'll be kind of pockets in around the trees, and there won't be like linear lines of cabbage and stuff that you traditionally think of.
Yeah.
It's just also with 2 acres, the scale of that, you'd want another 3 gardeners just at that alone.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant, and like that type of system is hugely successful for growing veg, and obviously the benefits of nuts, fruits, and all the rest of it as well. So it's a hugely beneficial system, and one that's gaining popularity. Like there is people doing this on a pretty big scale now, and it's
Yeah, there's a few spots over in the west of Ireland that I can follow online, and they're making a fair stab at it. Like a lot of stuff we're trialing up there, it's stuff I haven't done before. So it's for us, it's more of it's an experiment as well as kind of showing, kind of knowing that stuff that we do know, but it's also kind of we're experimenting and trying new stuff that's actually pretty boring if you're not trying.
Yeah, and you're gonna run pats.
We don't want to work.
Yeah, it's good to try it, and see what happens. But you're gonna run pats through this, I guess.
Yeah. At the moment, like at the beginning, it'll be just mowing pads, but hopefully in the future we'll replace them with proper kind of hard surface pathways, so it's fully accessible, because it'll match in with the front half, which we're putting valley lusk down at the moment with the new pathways in the front, just so it's more accessible.
Yeah, because with something like that, I guess, if you're looking at a formal vegetable garden in the beds and the lines, you can look at it from the outside and look in and you can see things. But with this, it's going to be very much about getting into the middle of it and seeing what's around every corner. And it sounds like it'll be something very exciting. So that's the 7-year plan?
Yeah, we'll say it, Shane, just give us a bit of time.
Yeah. Brilliant. So into the other wall garden now, which is where you're going planting the 3,000. Is it 3,000 perennials next week?
Yeah, that's phase 2 of the new herbaceous borders. We did phase 1 last year, which again was around the 3,000 plants, and that's just the initial base layer. We'll be adding stuff to it in the future.
Okay.
And then next year we're hoping to do the final phase. That'll be close to about 5,000 plants, maybe a little more next year. That'll be our biggest section in it. So that'll be completely new. We're digging out quite a large section of the lawn, and one of the pathways is going to cut off a big grass bank to the top of the steps, which will allow the second half of the wall garden to be fully accessible for Simon's history, which will be quite exciting for us.
And during the likes of this process now, are you restoring to an old plan, or are you bringing your own design element in here now as well?
No, thankfully. So it was I was blessed with, when I started, it's a shame that none of our records were kept. But a blessing in disguise, the whole silver lining thing is there's also no plans to work to. And because, like I mentioned earlier, that the wall garden is not even the original wall garden. It's funny enough, the glass house in the wall garden isn't even the original glass house.
All right.
They're kind of late 1800s, but it's about 50, 60 years. Then it was dismantled. We don't know whether it was dismantled and sold or what they did with it. We're not very sure. But the current one is there. It's actually smaller than what the original one was. But even if I say smaller, it's still like 180 foot long. It's colossal, like.
Yeah.
But that thankfully has been fully restored now. And even the pathway system, you can, if you're slightly OCD like me, you notice that like the pathways they're not in line. They're a foot out from the side entrance gates, so everything's like a foot to the left. It's very irritating. But
so you're going to move the entrance gate, aren't you?
So like but it's mad. It's like all those pathways, and there's even the hedge is only there about 80 years. The pathways are just over 100. And nothing's historic, or we got a conservationist in and everything. I didn't want to do anything wrong.
Yeah.
So we got her to check everything out, and she said no, there's nothing of anything real significant. So basically, I was left with a blank slate as it was for the redesign. So what I wanted to do, I wanted to look to the future. Rather than past, because we could have tried and mimic something that would have been there, but it still wouldn't have been the original garden. So I didn't see the purpose of it. And there's so many other gardens that
potentially that same thing will be somewhere else then. And
basically, and like there's some fantastic ones out there. So there's no point trying to imitate something that's already there. So I want to do something completely different. So what we're doing for herbaceous border, we completely redid the pathways, because I noticed for the first year of working here that the majority of people came in the gate, walked straight up. It was just a straight avenue of a path. The top of the steps, took a photo, walked straight back out the same avenue. They didn't explore the wider pathways and the wall gardens. I wanted to force people to slow down, spend time, and just be aware of their surroundings. So now when you walk in the front gate, the pathway splits through the new hedge, but you can't see where it goes. So it forces you to think and kind of slow down and just be aware of where you are. But now with the section that we're doing this year, the paths cut back in further up the hedge, so you'll have this sort of play with. You'd see people walk through the flower bed, but you've no idea how they got there. So kind of it draws you in a bit more.
Okay, yeah.
To want to find out how to get there. And but will be because it's over 3 times the size of the probation board it was there when I started in terms of planting size. So like the bed that we're doing next week, it's about 1/10 of an acre. That one alone.
Brilliant.
It won't even be the biggest bed when we're done. So
yeah, that's a big development. The formal hedges that you're talking about that are leading people, what are they?
they're you.
Oh,
So when you walk in, it's there's two basically straight linear lines of yew hedging going from the entrance gate to the top of the steps, as we call it.
Yeah.
Which is a dividing wall into the second half of the wall.
Yeah, because I saw them on your Instagram page, but I wasn't certain what they were. But it looks they look brilliant, and you obviously have no issues then with any Buxus issues, I guess. So before we go back to the glass house, so this planting next week and the perennial border that's already there. What are we seeing in that? What type of plants are going in, and what is in the existing borders?
So it's done in the prairie style planting. Kind of a lot of people would know he hold up from the high line. He's me God really, like, but I love that style of planting, the naturalistic style. So it's that kind of big sways of plants rather than little individual pockets. About 30% of the stuff that's in there is different types of ornamental grasses, so it gives that real prairie, sort of stylized prairie look. But I wanted to go one step further because we're just recently been designated a conservation site for native Irish blackfeet. We're doing work with NUIG in that genetic testing. That I wanted to have it as kind of pollinator friendly for them as possible. Obviously, a lot of the work with the rewilding around the rest of the estate, we're doing that anyway. But so with the herbaceous border, about 80% of the flowers are either native or cultivars of natives, and anything that isn't, they're ones we selected. So they accommodate specific mouth parts, or that for like the different types of, because of so many different pollinators, from flies to moths to wasps and bees, like things people wouldn't think of, even beetles. So we wanted to cater as much as we could, and then anything else that's in there is either food for birds in the winter, nesting material, or stuff people can invertebrates can hibernate in. So nothing's there for just prettiness sake. Everything has one or two extra purposes. It just happens to look very pretty.
Okay, so let's kind of look at a plants list here, or is it a secret until it's unveiled?
I know, like, to be honest with this, the beds we're in this year, they're very similar. There's a few kind of extras in it, but it's very similar to last year's plan, because I wanted these two beds you can see when you walk in, so I wanted to have that kind of somewhat similar. But next year, is because it's outside the hedge, we'll have a lot of fun with that. That'll be completely different. We're going to go nuts in that one. But like you get a lot of eryngiums, echiums, phlomis, persicaria. Kind of, there are a lot of big kind of spreaders or big plants, but because we have the room, we can take it. And then in between that, to soften it, an awful lot of it is kind of pixie patterns like the Distancia, kind of Stipa gigantea, to give like a more flowy, tall layers for like the softening. And everything there's an awful lot of it as well that will hold their seed heads throughout the winter, so you have that wonderful kind of seasonal interest the whole 4 seasons.
Yeah, huge advantage for birds, and obviously as well, like So it's funny you mentioned, I am actually in the process. It's almost done actually, of recording a course, an online course on the creation of a wildflower meadow with Sandro. So that's something that I've been working on. I actually hadn't told the listeners. I told them I was working on another course, but that's the next one. And it's brilliant. Yeah, like it's all recorded. There's a lot of editing going on at the moment, but that's the next course. And it's funny you mentioned him earlier, because like he is the foremost person in wildflower meadows, and so that's just the by the by. So the glass house then, so it's been recently restored. I didn't realize it wasn't the original. I assumed it was. So tell us about the size and what's going to happen in there, what is happening in there, all that sort of thing.
Yeah, so it took about a year to restore the frame with a nationally gated or joinery company in New Ross. which was quite nice to have a local company do it. They just got the contract to restore a small glass house as well. So the two they're both Richardson glass houses, around kind of 1906 to 1913 era.
Okay.
The small one was in a lot better nick than the big one, but at the same time, we still wasn't safe to use because of the fair section of the roof caved in. But when they started taking down the big glass house, it had been closed off to the public for years with a safety fence and everything, but they were saying that the only reason it was still standing was the metal work for the fence system in the roof was the only thing holding it together. So like as they were taking it apart, they said it was just like we unfortunately the majority of the timber just wasn't salvageable. Like we tried to look into splicing and that, but it just apart from the two gable ends and the internal walls and the doors and a few small sections of the roof beams, the majority of it unfortunately to be replaced. Most of the metal work is actually original, even down to the bolts. They reuse the bolts, like the detail it went into was fantastic. And then it wasn't, they got a foundry in New Ross then to recast. So it still has the original like Richardson kind of emblems and everything on it. So it looks so really, so like the details.
Nice.
We were able to bring back an awful lot of features that were lost over time, such as these timber vents that went along the front wall. That whole mechanism was gone, but we were thankfully our sister property bought a house in Cork. They also have Richardson glass houses, so the lads were able to go down and take photos of the mechanism that they had in the front, and were able to get an engineering company to mock up what it would have looked like. So we know they're working, and what the guys actually are currently at the moment is they're redoing the front walls, so they're stripping off all cement and putting back traditional hotline plaster, but they're also knocking out the archways that were there for the vinery. So we're not really sure what they did, but they blocked them up with concrete blocks for some reason. Obviously, they just weren't growing great, so I would have big gaping holes in the walls. So they've been knocked out, and they're restoring them fully. So that's
brilliant.
It's smashing it. It looked really like Italian now at that end of it. In the bar, it's stunning.
Class. And what timber, you're saying all the timber wasn't salvageable. What timber went back into it, or what timber is used in those?
It was a mixture. So originally they wanted the whole thing to be a koya, it's like a treated type of a pine, but it was just obviously it was again when we started it was around the time when there was a huge timber shortage kind of worldwide.
Right, yeah.
But they got as much supply as they can, but then there was like sustainably sourced mahogany, and there's a few other bits and stuff. So it's a mixture of timbers as much as I believe overall is what they used.
And so are you in that glass house working yet? No? Or is it still?
There's 4 rooms in the glass house. We have the center room that's open to the public at the moment, and we're hoping to have either 1 or 2 other ones open next year. So there's an awful lot of bindweed and other stuff in the bed. So we've a lot of work to do in the other rooms, but the center room that we did actually in there was quite interesting. They concrete shelved over these huge sunken beds in the ground, so we're able to knock them out. And well, I say it was great, but we could barrow 12 ton of rubble out by hand and barrow in 26 ton of soil to fill in the beds. But
at least you weren't building a lake.
Oh God, stop! It was like we can complain, but we probably shouldn't. But yeah, that's mad. So that's all planted up now. It's kind of like a temporary start of a pan house. So we brought back. It was actually Johnstown's the first place in Wexford and one of the first islands to grow an edible banana like the Cavendish one. So as a nod to that, we 2 poinsettias inside there, like the dwarf bananas. We can't grow the big guys because
you don't have the height.
Small enough, but we have a few little nods to that, and we found the original variety of grape was Black Hamburg that used to grow in the winery, so we loaded them, took cuttings off one of our volunteers' grapevines, and they're all rooting now. So hopefully, if we get around to next year, we'll have the original variety of grape back in the glass house again. So.
It's supposed to be an easy variety to grow in Ireland, apparently.
Oh, that's just it. I think it's a high producer. It's one of the few as well that you can eat as well as juice. So it's quite nice. Yeah.
Very good. So that's the kind of plans for the glass house. What else is happening that we haven't mentioned in the I suppose at the moment or in the foreseeable future?
Suppose for ourselves, it's the main focus for us now is we started plant sales this year, so that's another thing.
Okay.
So like everything that's for sale, it's either stuff you see in the herbaceous border itself or else in the glass house. So it kind of gives people they can see on site kind of what it looks like.
Yeah.
Which is quite nice, an extra bit of movement and all that.
Yeah. But, and is this are they propagated on site generally or some?
Yeah, everything's propagated on site. So there's 3 of us in total in the garden team, which is hopefully going to expand in the future.
Yeah, it sounds like it might need to. Yeah.
Yeah, it's our propagation guy is Marty Revel. So we're blessed to get him because he's fantastic. So he does all the propagating. So it's all done either seed or cuttings ourselves on site. And yeah, so like that's everything from stuff for ourselves in the race water to plant sales. So we come back quite for the size of the area that we have. We've been producing quite well, and we hope to turn one of the rooms into a big glass house into our new propagation room next year. So hopefully make it a bit easier and having a bit more room to work with.
Yeah. And so the 3,000 that are getting planted next week, they're more or less propagated yourselves.
Yeah, everything absolutely. We haven't, apart from trees, like kind of big specimen trees, now everything is propagated ourselves on site. All peat-free compost as well. So it's been
class. That's a big undertaking.
Yeah, look at it. I don't like to make it too easy on him. Like
he sounds like he's well able anyway. Peat-free compost. I had no intention of going there, but now that you've mentioned it, what did you use and how did you find it?
We went for Classman in the it's more expensive, but we found it's the only thing that kind of bugs us a little bit with that is
it has coir.
It comes in the bags.
Oh
yeah. You can't get like a couple of tons delivered, which is a bit. It's just we're trying to reduce the plastic on the site as well. So that's the only thing that bugs. But as a compost, it's fantastic because we did a year's trial with peat and stuff and non-peat stuff. And their non-peat stuff was retaining water just as well as the other ones, which we were having issue with. I don't want to bad talk. So other peat-free brands.
Yeah.
And OGs were absolutely shocking.
Right.
So they were the ones that we settled on, and it was definitely worth it. Like we've had 0 issues with them so far. So
Brilliant. So as we start to finish off the plans for the next few years, you've kind of touched on it a little bit, but maybe reiterate and sort of you're saying 10 years for the food forest.
The Edinburgh woodlands next year, all going to plan. We should have the final phase of herbaceous water done, and other than that, it's probably just kind of more developing the woodlands and stuff around the site. Like we have a sunken garden as well there that we finished last year. That was a 2-year project.
Tell us a little bit about that.
That was actually one of the few areas that we had photos of what it did look originally, but it was a real ornate, like Baroque style, perfectly symmetry garden with like box hedging and either annuals, roses or herbs inside it. But unfortunately, that was like mid 1800s. We like a photo from 1836, but back then like the trees were like 8 foot high. Where now we like mature redwoods and everything, and the garden itself we used to call it bog garden because lads couldn't cut the grass in for most of the year. It was that way. So what I did with that was I was looking at other gardens that were having issues with box blight and that because we were clearly never going to put that back in. It was 24-foot and gardeners at the time, so
yeah.
we don't have that now. So I looked at like Versailles and that where they started replacing a lot of their box hedging gardens with basically very intricate pathways. So I was looking at kind of old kind of pagan symbols and stuff like that, and I kind of used those as the inspiration for the pathway system. So in the garden cells. So again, I as a nod to the past, it's symmetrical. So one half is perfectly the same as the other. Then we've a 6-meter diameter reflection pond in the center, which is rough dimensions of the original pond that was there, but unfortunately was taken away. So like there's a lot of nods to the past, but again, we had to modernize it so it's workable for kind of the team that we have, and also going forward, like the planting just wouldn't have survived now, would have been either blight or mildew.
Yeah. And box moth has become a huge problem this year. We had avoided it. There was a lot of talk in Europe for the last good few years about it, but the last kind of 2 years particularly, and this year more than ever, there has been huge instances of box moth around the country.
Because we find if anything bad is happening, it'll hit us. We've got everything under the sun. Particularly pests and disease actually were fairly good. Like we never, it's the bane of people's life. And we go, what do you do for slugs? And we're like, nothing. We've enough frogs and birds. We never
Yeah.
issue. But any disease we would hit, like sure, we've had the ash dieback. We've had load. We thought we were going to have the pine beetle there. There was a few of our Portuguese varieties of the pine up in the Arboretum. A few of them were looking fairly shut, but it seemed to have bounced back. So hopefully it was just the harsh June or something like that was getting to them.
Okay.
But we've lost an awful lot of our mature chestnuts to the leaf miner and denture was that week, and the honey fungus kicks in. So our trees have taken quite a battering, really, more than anything here.
Right. And what about the ash trees? How are they? So obviously you've said you've got dieback. It's funny around the country when you look at them. Like here, right along the edge of my house, I've ash trees, and there's a couple of them heading for dead, I would say. But there's others that were quite badly affected, and they seem, touch wood, they seem to have bounced back very strong in the last 2 years. So I'm kind of hopeful.
The exact same here. Like a lot of our kind of, I would say, medium age ones, kind of like 50-year-old ones, they were the most badly hit. But like our really mature ones, I think like close to 100 or over 100. Maybe about a third of the crown kind of died back, but we're now seeing a lot of suckering kind of from further down in the crown, maybe. So they seem to be bouncing back. And there was actually one of the trees we did a trial with one of our really mature ones that was hit quite bad, and we actually reduced the crown down to about a third of its size. And that's sprouting new shoots like the new time. So they could swear was never exactly a sewer, we just hollered it for the crack. Like there's no signs of dieback in that. So yeah, we've had fairly good kind of
yeah. That's funny. You're after rubbishing a theory that I had in my head, because of the ones that I have outside here that I said were struggling. The two that are almost dead are two that I had to lop off branches because I was accessing there, and they're the two that are almost dead. And I put it down to the fact that I had, lopped off branches, and I was obviously allowing the infection to get deeper in through the wound or something. That's what I had in my head, but obviously that's not.
Well, none of us. We could have been just very lucky, to be honest with you, because we only did it with one tree. So
yeah. So it's not an extensive trial. Yeah, but yeah, interesting. So sunken garden we was talking about. What else is on the plan for the next couple of years, or have we kind of covered it all?
We've discovered a load of stuff around. I'm kind of cursed. There's always a running joke. Every time we get a digger in, I find something. So we've a few features that were lost over the years that we hope to restore in the future. So I was digging out a half-acre fuchsia there. It was actually the first week into COVID, and I found a small section of wall, and I was like, that's kind of weird. Next thing I kept digging, next thing I found a second section of wall. I was like, okay, I need to stop. And it turns out it's the extension of our statue walk wall. So we have an estate map in the museum, and it was drawn into it, but there was a load of other stuff drawn on the map that we like. There's no signs of it. So we always assumed there was stuff that they aspired to build, but they never did. But the section wall that I found match up perfectly with the lines in the map, and we found then once we started looking, we're like, oh yeah, there's actually indents in the lawn here and there, so we can trace back the shape of the wall. So we've been collecting stones around the ground for the last 4 years. So hopefully in the future we get that restored to extend the terrace wall. And what else? Actually, we found people might have seen it on the Great Irish Imperials program, where we found the two secret rooms in underneath the ground off the Castle Lake. That was that was more curiosity got the better of me kind of with that one. There was like these two little square holes in the wall, and we were down cleaning the wall out on our kayaks, and it's like, oh, here I need to climb through this hole and see why is there a hole in the wall? And sure, it opened up, and there's in underneath our fishing tower and another viewing platform, there's these like 5-foot high big rooms inside underground. They don't show up in any land registry map or any estate map that we found, so they seem to be just two secret grottos. So that was a bit of crack finding them.
That was good.
Yeah.
Look, it's lucky you came back out.
Oh Jesus, yeah.
It could have been an Indiana Jones moment there.
So yeah, I would have said to my wife, she's like, you saw a hole and you decided I'm just going to climb. So it's just, yeah. But
Yeah,
I don't
so
know, like we found foundations. We actually found the section of foundations in the original glass house. Unfortunately, we'll never be able to rebuild it. It's like it'd be millions. But that was fun. We found like other bits of foundations to turrets and other follies around the ground. So I know there might be future projects of either signs to show what was here or something. But
yeah,
it was every time
endless
you see you
possibilities.
bubble they sweat.
Yeah. Endless possibilities, as I say. So it's 10 years or so since I've been there. So yeah, must get down because it sounds like a lot has happened even in the last 4 years. So that'll be interesting to
Quite a
see.
few changes.
Yeah. Tell people obviously where they can visit. I know there's Christmas events coming up. There's Halloween events coming up. When this episode goes out, it'll already have passed, but there was a beekeeping event. So maybe tell us about things that do happen from time to time and where they can find both you and Johnstown Castle. Not hard to find, but yeah, direct them in the right direction.
Yeah, I suppose so. The best way to keep in touch is on both the the social media page, which is like Johnstown Castle on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. But on the website itself, there's an event page on the website for just Johnstown Castle again. Just it'll come up. And there's also our the charity that owns us. It's the Irish Heritage Trust. They have other sister properties both in Cork and they've Stroketown, Roscommon. So you'll find on the Irish Heritage Trust website, you'll find all of them as well as ourselves. And it's just for me, then I do a few flower photos and that of the day to day of what we're doing in the garden on Instagram. So that's Johnstown Castle Head Gardener. Very inventive.
Yeah, so yeah, no, it's a beautiful place for anyone that hasn't been. A beautiful place, as I say, I haven't been in a while, but it is class. Definitely need to get down again. Ciaran, it's been a really interesting chat. There's lots going on, and it sounds like there's lots potentially for you to get your teeth into in the future as well. So it's been a really interesting chat, and thanks very much for coming on Master My Garden podcast.
Actually, no, it's grand. Thanks very much for having me. It was brilliant.
So that's been this week's episode. Huge thanks to Ciaran for coming on. Really interesting chat. Really interesting gardens. Lots going on down there, and keep an eye on their page, as he said, for future events. Both for not just on the gardening side. There's lots of family events down there, so worth keeping an eye on. And on the gardening side, obviously, there's big developments afoot between edible forests and new perennial borders and all of that sort of thing. So there's lots to keep an eye out for, and lots to learn there from that as well, in terms of everything that we spoke about. So the forest restoration, stepping back out into the woodland and into the new glasshouse and borders. So lots to learn there from that as well. So it's been a really interesting episode. Thanks for listening. Until the next time, happy gardening.